I do get the question a lot about buying a used breast pump or using a breast pump from a previous pregnancy. So let's take a look at the pros and cons here, as well as the guidelines, so that you can figure out what is going to work best for you. If you're new to the channel, my name is Allison Tolman. I'm a lactation consultant and a breast pump expert. And here we talk about breast pumps a lot and how to combine them with breastfeeding. I even work with moms individually, specifically who are going back to work and combining breastfeeding and pumping. So if that's you, you can work with me down in the description. Otherwise, let's just jump right into used breast pumps. First, let's just start out with the obvious, okay? The FDA does not recommend using a used breast pump, but I do feel like it's my responsibility to kind of share some of these ideas for you to help you get a bigger picture of whether you want to do that or not. At the end too, we'll talk about your own personal pumps from a previous pregnancy, and we'll just kind of cover that topic quickly as well. All right, first let's start by defining single-use pumps and multi-user pumps. So there are some multi-user pumps out there that can actually be used by multiple people. These aren't the ones that you usually see in buy-sell trade pages because they're usually really big and really heavy and really bulky, and they cost thousands of dollars, okay? This is an example of a really big multi-user pump. Oh, heavens. We've got the Medela Symphony over here. That's another one. These are actually cleared by the FDA to be fine for multi-users. So if you're renting one of those or using it at their hospital, they're actually designed for that. You have to get your own flange kit and tubing and everything, but they do have an extra barrier between the flange kit and the pump motor itself. This is not the same thing as being a closed system pump, okay? So closed system pumps are a pump that has a barrier in the flange setup, okay, like a backflow protector. Here's a really common example of that. You can see that there is a barrier between where the milk is and the tubing that goes to the pump, okay? So this is an example of a closed system kit, usually goes with a closed system pump. That doesn't mean that it's multi-user, okay? That's actually a clearance from the FDA. And there is some extra stuff in there that makes it a multi-user pump. The term hospital grade also does not mean multi-user, okay? This term is not regulated at all by the FDA, and there's a whole nother video talking about hospital grade, what that means, and what it doesn't mean, and I'll link that up top and down below in the description for you. But again, not the same thing. Single-user pumps and multi-user pumps are different, okay? So knowing that, if you are a lactation professional who is renting out a single user pump like this because it has that closed system flange kit, that is probably not okay. Actually, more than probably, it is not appropriate for professionals, and you should stop doing that. We actually have an extensive set of courses for lactation professionals specifically around pumping, and you can join that down below if that is you. And as a user, if you have the option of renting a single user pump from a professional or a company, you should probably not do that, okay? Because they're not following FDA and best practice guidelines. But for the users, you have a lot more freedom here. Like, this is your experience in your life. And if you're comfortable with some of the risks, the pros outweigh those for you, then I'm not going to tell you what to do. But let's just talk about actually the pros and cons of used breast pumps and go from there. Okay, the first and honestly really only pro of this scenario is that breast pumps are expensive. And if you bought an expensive pump and it doesn't work for you, or you want another pump or multiple other pumps, it is expensive. And I really feel for you there. So I can see where borrowing or buying used, or especially if you know the person, you know, family, friends, or just loaners, that seems appealing. And I'm not going to deny that that is cheaper. I really wish there was a way that we could try and test pumps before we buy them. I get that request all the time, and I don't actually know how to make that happen, but some kind of like breast pump zoo or something where you could try them out before you buy would be awesome. Nothing that I know of exists like that yet, so now this is why we're kind of stuck in this weird place. Okay, so let's talk about some of the cons and risk factors associated here. We'll just start with the most obvious one first, which is sanitation, okay? You might actually be comfortable with this risk, especially if you know the person or you're getting it from someone that you're confident, took good care of it, you trust how long they used it for. But I do just want to share with you what the FDA says about this, just so you know. They say, customers should be aware of the hazards of renting or sharing a breast pump that is not designed for multi-users, even with family and friends. Contaminated breast pumps can cause you and your baby to develop an infection. And I know that these risks may seem low, and they might be, but that isn't something that I would probably feel comfortable doing. Now, full disclosure, I did use a used breast pump from a friend. It was even an open system pump, which is a huge no-no too, back in the day when I had my first baby, honestly, because I didn't know better. And there were a lot of problems. We didn't get sick, okay? Nobody got contaminated or anything like that, but we pretty easily could have. And there were a lot of other problems that we're going to talk about in just a second that came with doing that as well. But again, I didn't know, all right? So one more thing from the FDA on this point. They say even if a used device looks really clean, potentially infectious particles may survive in the breast pump and or its accessories for a surprisingly long time. So I just want to share the facts with you so that you're aware. If you choose to ignore this con, that's up to you, but that's the information. Okay, the number 2 con of a used breast pump is it voids the warranty. So sharing a breast pump may violate the manufacturer's warranty. Actually, it definitely will if it's not a multi-user pump, which means that you might not be able to get help from the manufacturer if you have a problem with the pump. Okay, so again, maybe not a huge deal because you're getting it probably at a discounted price anyway, but the warranty is voided. And then the number 3 con, this is actually the biggest con for me, okay? Aside from like sanitation warranty, like you might be fine with all those, but this one's a big deal for me. And this is the unknown factor, okay? The biggest downside of relying on a previously used breast pump is that you don't know what condition it's in, okay? If your milk supply is not what you expected it to be, a little piece in the back of your mind is going to wonder if it's actually the pump, okay? If it's malfunctioning, if it was heavily used, if it wasn't used appropriately by the previous person. Anytime, especially when you do parts hacking, so when you're using parts that didn't come with the pump, which like everybody does, okay? That's something as simple as using like a Pump and Pals flange with that, or wearing cups with your pump. These things are really common practice and they're not bad at all, but that is going to affect the motor. They're not designed to use with any other parts aside from what they came from. So when you do that kind of Franken pumping, it's going to affect the motor, right? We don't really know how it's going to affect that, but it will. So this is the concern that I have, and this kind of ties into the next point in using a pump from your previous pregnancy, is when we're trying to figure out what's wrong with your milk supply, it's not what we expected, we're going through all of these variables. If you have a previously used pump, either from someone else or from your previous pregnancy, that's another variable that we have to add into the equation, that it might actually be the pump that's malfunctioning. So to eliminate that factor, you can just get a new pump, okay? Now, here's the thing with previously used pumps from yourself in a previous pregnancy, okay? I actually think that these are usually fine to use again. We don't have to worry as much about the sanitation factor because it's in your home, it's your stuff, whatever. Sometimes the longer that the pump is just alive in the world, you might have a risk of bacteria forming somewhere deep inside, which would have happened to anyone, regardless if it was you, but it's not super common. So unless your pump was used really heavily by you in your previous pregnancy and it is just like on its last leg, it's actually probably fine to use again. Don't forget though, you kind of will have that unknown factor that we talked about, that extra variable. So I usually always recommend getting a new pump with every pregnancy. Maybe you try a different style of pump if you want. Maybe you've got that like good old reliable tabletop pump and you want to try a wearable one this time. And so you have 2. But I think it can be nice to have a newer pump to kind of compare with the older pump if that ever does become a question. You will need to replace all of the parts aside from the pump. So the tubing, the flanges, the valves, the backflow protectors, anything else that attaches to the pump, that will all need to be replaced with that pregnancy. That stuff just wears out. I'll actually create an Amazon storefront with some replacement parts for you that I'll link down below for some of the most common pumps that I see out there. The Spectra pump is actually the only pump that I know of that you can check the hours on, okay? And it's like this crazy little crisscross system, which I will put down below in the comments for you. But you can actually see that this pump has 2 hours on it. See that 00002? It might be backwards for you, but this pump, I got it to do some testing, so I've really only run some testing on it. But you can actually see how many hours are on it. I have another one. Let me see how many hours are on that one. I actually got this one off of eBay. I didn't intend to use it. I did want to just run it through a couple of tests as a used pump, and I also wanted to break it open and see what was inside. So I did buy an eBay pump, but I'm not going to use it. This one, it looks like, has 144 hours on it. See that right in the middle there? I actually think I might have one more. Of course I do. I have too many pumps. This one has 29 hours on it. Whoa, heavy hitter. So then that begs the question, would I go sell this pump that has 29 hours? That's like nothing, or even 2 hours, right? It's brand new, hasn't been used, except for, I actually could sell mine because it wasn't used on humans, but it's a hard question, right? It's a $200 pump that's just sitting there doing nothing. And, you know, I probably won't because I'm a professional and the FDA says not, but as a user, you're held to different standards. And so I think at the end of the day, it's just going to be what you're comfortable with. I know these are so expensive and I wish that there was a better way to help you decide which pumps to get before you got them. I actually do this pretty often inside my program with my members because I can get to know them better. It's really hard on YouTube to say this is the best pump or this one's going to work for the most people. But once I know you and your scenario and what needs you have and what your baby does and what things you like on other pumps, it can be pretty easy for me to narrow down some of the options that I can never guarantee, but pretty reliably say these are going to work for you. You're going to like these. So if that's the kind of help and support you're interested in, not only choosing a pump, but in all aspects of pumping, you can come join us inside our Pumping for Working Moms program. One other note about pumps from a previous pregnancy. If you have a smart pump, meaning that it can connect to an app, you do need to charge it and turn it on periodically. I would recommend every few weeks. So if you just finished up pumping with your smart pump and you know you're going to be having another baby soonish, for the next year, you might want to turn that thing on every few weeks, make sure that it's updated. Those little batteries just do not last well. So if you have a smart pump, you're like, I just used this with my last one, and you can't get it to turn on, it's probably also not under warranty and it's just dead. So before you kind of put that in your plan as this is the pump I'm going to use, make sure that it still works. Okay, I hope that helps you understand used breast pumps a little bit better. As always, if you have questions or concerns, you can put those in the comments. Otherwise, we'll see you on the next video. Happy pumping.